Skulk sat on high, extremely content with himself. He thought about how not only were the people below him happy, but every day they sent a group to shower him with food and drink as they regaled him with stories of how everything worked out. He considered how his good friend Camelman, who stuck with him through all of this, now was allowed to rest at the base of the ogre's throne. A man-camel so exhausted from the past year that he slept for what seemed like months. The beast closed his eyes, took a deep breath in, and reopened them to take in the world he had fixed. To be honest, it didn't feel like what he saw matched these warm feelings he was having. The Earth was making some pretty depressing choices that dampened the ogre's ability to celebrate his achievements. For instance, after decades of aimlessly swirling around the rim of the world, the sun had finally been pulled below the horizon and hadn't come back. Whether the moon was smuggled with it, or if it had ever been there in the first place didn't matter, as nothing filled the sky. Only a few stars barely pushed through the smog-filled heavens above the city to allow the most minimal of light to be seen. It also had been monsooning pretty much all day every day, if you could even call it a day anymore. It had been raining so hard, in fact, that it drowned out the clamoring of the masses gathering at the bottom of the mountain. The mountain constantly trembled with instability as the heavy rains increasingly threatened to drag away heaps of piled trash that made the base of the ogre's crag. On top of all this, something definitely smelled like it was burning. The ogre shook his head and went back to what he did most these days, eating the food and drinking the drink brought to him while thinking about all the great things the people told him he had done. Rarely, if at all, did Skulk think of Lady Baghead anymore. He ran his fingers over her bag absent-mindedly from time to time, but out of nervous habit, not out of melancholy. In fact, his thoughts had gone so far from her that he barely felt her bag in his hand anymore. The few times he did think of her, he mostly thought about how much better of a job he had done at ruling, and how ridiculous it was to think that they loved each other. He'd usually give a hearty, fattened laugh whenever one of these thoughts came about and go back to stuffing his face with rain-soaked meats. Though, he never did challenge her memory so far as to let go of her bag in his hand. And he'd never admit to himself that when he did think of her in those rare occasions, it secretly hurt deeply. As lightning ran across the clouds towards the edge of the world, Skulk noticed a faint light growing ahead of him. He smiled one of his big, smelly grins. The sun was coming back. The Earth finally got the memo. Everything was indeed fine. The smog parted above him and the rain subdued, lifting the beast to the happiest he had ever been. He had even fixed the weather. Skulk leaned back in his chair and looked down at his clenched fist.
See? I never needed you.
The beast opened his paw. A chill shot up his spine. Only a few threads looked back at Skulk. Where had her bag gone? He frantically checked around his throne to see if he had somehow dropped it. Nothing. The ogre sat back down and stared at the remaining threads in his otherwise empty hand. All her memories flooded the beast's brain, forcing him to come face to face with the fact he had conned himself into forgetting how much he missed her. As he fought hard to hold back the tears swelling in his eyes, the smog snapped shut above him. As it always did after brief moments of respite, the earth cried for him, pouring like it never poured before. The strands quickly floated to the top of the ogre's hand and waterfalled onto the mountaintop. Skulk's eyes followed them along a small bored-out drainage path towards the edge of the crag, and then, boop, she was gone. Every part of her. This would be hard enough to deal with for the day, but something much more pressing caught the ogre's attention. Lifting his vision slightly above the edge of his mountain, Skulk noticed something else was quite amiss. The returning sunlight that so joyfully elated the beast moments ago no longer seemed to be cresting the horizon. No, that flickering luminous glow was clearly cresting the edge of the mountaintop. Fire. Fire atop torches made of broken wood and plastic came steadily towards his open-air throne room. The mountain was ablaze with treason. Wet, soggy people spilled onto his realm with the same fire they carried in their eyes. Two men in long red robes and bags over their heads carried the giant reconstructed Baghead artifact behind the mob as another walked in front of it, arm extended, palm up, aiming at the Beast King. What a fool he had been. How different a creature he had become when piled with adoration. He had allowed himself to ignore the truths of the world for the momentary feel-goods of adulation. The beast's gut rumbled with something that felt like bees again, only this time they had stingers. Fear like he had never experienced filled the beast. Fear burning furiously off the ignorance upon ignorance to which he finally realized he had succumbed. The experience of what is fair was coming for him. He dreaded what he always dreamed he'd lead. A united people overthrowing the one who caused their oppression. Skulk panickedly shook Camelman to wake the last being still on his side. Unfortunately, to the beast's dismay, the gangly one's past few months of silence had a lot more to do with him being dead than some long nap Skulk thought he was taking. With spitty foam caked around his mouth, the man-camel fell into an awkward position, exposing a copious amount of needles and empty baggies underneath him. The ogre was now all alone. As the citizens surrounded the beast with flaming sticks of garbage, Skulk dropped to his knees and finally understood why Lady Baghead did what she did. Humans didn't want what was right. They just wanted anything and everything. All of it. And when they couldn't have it all, they blamed someone outside themselves and called for his or her head. They were built to do this until the end of time, or at least until the last head was called for. Skulk realized the giant had kept them focused on mundane tasks and entertainment to keep them quelled. And when it wasn't enough, she found a never-dying head in the ogre that the people could call for. His death would subdue their evil human needs and stop them, at least momentarily, from turning on themselves. But she was gone now, and there hadn't been anyone curating their lives for a while now. The people poked and prodded the ogre while the Cabal leader set up an apse to orate from.
The end is nigh, for the golem on high. In revenge, you'll be gored for killing our lord!
Wait, you were able to see her?
Nay, but we felt her before your murder.
I did not kill her, I loved her! I loved her. Once.
Rise from the beast, unbecoming in the least. Her bag in your hand, we've recovered again. and now it is you that will cease! Ah!
The Cabal leader clenched his fist, and the people closed in. Skulk turned up to the heavens, emitting all his feelings to the skies above. The skies where he imagined his lost giant was. There was nothing left to stop the rage of humanity. His end was inevitable. Their end was inevitable. The one who was foolish enough to believe he could be the people's savior was now the beginning of their undoing. The sounds of the mob faded. The sounds of the rain faded. The Cabal's clamorings faded. It was all replaced by a faint, high-pitched ringing in the ogre's ears. He felt numb. He missed the days where he restarted with a fresh slate. He wished we could do it all over again. A chance for change. A chance to grow new again. But in truth, growth can only come when a base is solid. And this city's roots were rotten. Its people were rotten. And no one ever addressed their rotten problems. Failure has always been hard to admit. As the heat from the torches began to sear Skulk's thick hide, the ogre could take no more. Why had they lied to him? Why had they lied to themselves? He was finished trying to help. He was finished pretending they were learning. He was finished being the head they called for. Sometimes the only way we truly understand things is by understanding how fragile life truly is. The time to repent had come. For everyone. For us all. The ogre's eyes glazed over as his thoughts went white. The reckoning was moments away, and it came in the form of the one being trying to hold it at bay for far too long. Skulk reached his hand out and placed it atop the closest yelling head. The man, unfazed, screamed obscenities while poking his fire stick at Skulk. The poor sap had no previous experience to know what was coming his way. Skulk's eyes unglazed for a mere moment as he continued his skyward gaze. One last chance for some sign that this truly wasn't the end. Maybe the rain would stop. Maybe the sun would come back. Maybe the towers would stop falling. Maybe the people would stop hating. Maybe she would come back. But the rain kept raining. The sun remained set. The towers continued to fall apart. The people still hated. And she was definitely not coming back. The beast's eyes glazed back over as he lowered his head to look straight through the crowd. With one fell swoop, accompanied by the squishy sound of a body driven into a gelatinous goop, Skulk planted the irate human, 100% of his body, into the ground, and finally silence came. The people stopped in their tracks, mouth agape, and watched as the ogre rose from his knees and put his hands on two more people near him. The crowd was motionless with disbelief. Then Skulk planted his next two seeds. The end times commenced. Panic ensued as Skulk turned to look back at Camelman's dead body. Something about the way his huge dead eyes sat in his camel skull reminded the ogre of Lady Baghead. The beast felt shame. With eyes just as dead and lifeless, down the mountain Skulk went planting his constituents. As he burned with the rage of every torch that came for him, he did not show it on the outside. He did not flail his arms. He did not run towards the masses. He did not even bray his wretched name. No, Skulk was too full of feelings, of care, of purpose. There was no show to be given, no urgency to this matter. The end takes as long as it takes. To control the wildfire inside his mind, the beast worked slowly, methodically, as he repeated the words, under his breath. You'd think he'd have found much joy planting the cabal that set these events in motion, but he didn't. It gave him no pleasure, just like the other thousands of lights he already put out, or was about to. At the base of the crag, the Endbringer faced the city. The way of life in this city wasn't innovation. It was always literally what it was. Piles of trash stacked in different ways. The ogre walked straight through a shambled tower and brought it to the ground. As the people tried to flee, the monsoon swept away the last bits of trash, keeping the mountain base erect, bringing the Goliath down. The streets flooded with garbage, causing the evacuating masses to fall all over each other in an effort to save themselves. A few militarily trained citizens took control of one of the boom tubes and aimed it at the rampaging ogre. Knocking the beast back and leaving a white-hot pile of trash in his shoulder, the boom tube connected. Skulk let out a thunderous yell. The rage grew brighter in his belly as his demeanor grew more genuine. Skulk stormed over to the would-be army. He ripped the boom tube out of the small platoon's hands so forcefully that their arms stuck to the cannon. Skulk jammed what remained of the men inside, pulled the crank, and fired the men at the crumbling buildings around them. It was incredible how much damage they did. The ogre picked up a crane and hurtled it into another boom tube. The collision bent the shaft of the tube, raining fire down on the citizens. In turn, this bent more boom tubes, which exploded on the ground in a deadly display of fireworks, as though it were a celebration of the world's independence from humans. Skulk ceaselessly scoured the city for more seeds to plant. He buried all he could find and laid flat any man-made creations in an effort to quell his inner hate. They deserved all this as they respected nothing, he thought. The city caught fire as the boom tubes hit the oil pools in the southernmost part of the city. The doomsayers rejoiced in the streets and did not run as they celebrated how right they were. Then they were planted too. It took 4 days for Skulk to reduce the city to rubble. The boom tubes eventually ran out of ammo, the fires eventually had nothing left to burn, and every single tower was felled. The city that was always falling apart, the last city of man, was no more. With the end brought, Skulk aimlessly walked the carnage he put to his city, searching for something not leveled, as his rage finally began to subdue. A program with nothing left to compute. Yet all was not silent. A small boy emerged digging through the rubble. The child didn't seem to have any hate or fear in him, only curiosity and hunger. The same curiosity and hunger an old Skulk might have had. The beast placed his hand on the boy's head, and a vision of hammer hands flashed before his eyes. Was this what he had become? Skulk's eyes unlocked from their dead position as the boy found a small flower that somehow pushed its way through the waste. As he leaned to pick it up, Skulk saw what looked like 2 hands of a clock peek from underneath his sleeves. Whether they were or not, it felt comforting to think the grumpy old man he had hoped to call friend so long ago was somehow here with him. Skulk slightly smiled for the first time in a long time. The young lad carefully dug out the earth around the flower's roots and placed it in a half-destroyed bowl so that he could present it to Skulk.
You look tired.
Skulk was taken aback. It had been so long since someone commented on something outside of themselves that he wasn't quite prepared to deal with it. His eyes shook and his knees felt weak. He was in fact tired. Extremely tired. The beast picked up the boy still holding the potted flower and turned him towards the world outside the fallen walls of the city. They both sat there looking at the vast landscape that hadn't been explored in a very long time, and both felt the thrill of curiosity once more.
Grow again.
With as gentle of a push as he could, which was still pretty forceful, he sent the boy stumbling on a path out into the open world. He watched as the boy inquisitively foraged his way out of the city for the first and last time. Skulk's hands had been laid upon so many heads in the last 4 days, but now he placed one on his own. Looking up to the sky, the ogre sent all the emotions returning to him into the universe. Somewhere on a planet far from Earth, Lady Baghead didn't feel so alone for a moment. Or at least he hoped. The beast looked back to the earth as the child turned to see the ogre once more. The young boy placed his hand on his head, thinking it was some form of valediction, and smiled. Skulk smiled as well. It was finally time to rest. As the lad returned to his journey, the sun peeked its head over the horizon. Skulk took one last look at the planet he hoped would finally recoup and planted his exhausted body into the ground.
Any meaning, need to search with more feeling, fill this room to its ceiling. Back to the beginning, haven't found any meaning, need to search with more feeling, fill this room to its ceiling. Any meaning, need to search with more feeling, fill this room to its ceiling. Back to the beginning, haven't found any meaning. Once again now with feeling, fill this world to its ceiling.
Many centuries passed, almost a millennium. The plastic had almost all decomposed. The seas were wet and no longer viscous with oil. The city that was always falling apart, now a field of grass. A town without borders was built by the extremely few survivors who told stories of the beast that destroyed humankind. The stories eventually turned into lore, then turned into lost words, as the new world began to rebuild the same old forgotten mistakes. Off in a field not too far from where the city that was always falling apart once existed, came a rumbling under a giant oak tree many times the size of our old beastly friend. The earth moved and shook as a large hand broke through the surface. Pulling himself out of the ground, under a sun high in the sky, Skulk, with no knowledge at all in his head, smiled at the trees and animals around him. The grass, the rabbits, the deer, the foliage, all smelled so fresh, and the beast wanted to touch and taste many things. As he went to stand for the first time in a long time, the ground around the tree slightly caved, causing the tree to creak on the edge of the hole. The ogre turned around to see what made the noise and found the oak in all its glory with branches spread wide. It was magnificent, he thought. Something that made life worth living. And as the tree leaned forward, losing its balance on the edge of the ogre's birthing canal, Skulk spread his arms wide to receive its heavy ogre-squishing hug, welcoming him back to his same old repetitive existence.
Haunted by visions of war, haunted by global fucking changes we all seem to ignore, haunted by 5 after 4, haunted by things I abhor, haunted by everyone's arrangement to make sure that we hoard, haunted by pen versus sword. I just can't seem to find my dreams at night. I just can't seem to find the reasons we should put up a fight. I just can't seem to get it right. We're finite. We're finite. Go deeper, go deeper, go deeper. Go deeper, go